Good evening. In compliance with Chapter 551 Open Meetings of the Texas Government Code, I call to order a regular voting meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Austin Independent School District for Monday, December 14, 2020 at 6:48 p.m. A quorum of the board, along with a limited number of our staff members, are physically present at AISD headquarters to conduct this meeting. In addition, we have a majority of our staff joining us by video. To our audience tuning in remotely, welcome and thank you for joining us. We will move to the approval of the agenda. Secretary Ellens, do you have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second? Having a motion by Secretary Ellens and a second by Trustee Zapata to approve the agenda, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. The motion passes by all those on the dais. Secretary Ellens, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and the pledge to the Texas flag? The next item on our agenda is under the President's Report. You know, 2020 has been a year like no other. And I want to take a few minutes to recognize the extraordinary efforts that have been made by our teachers, counselors, librarians, administration, food service, technology, and transportation staff, everyone at our campuses, to prepare every student with the knowledge and skills to thrive in college, career, and life. And this includes acknowledging our students and their hard work, both our on-campus and our remote learners. It's been incredible to see how you've adapted to new ways of learning and collaborating with your teachers and each other. Please take time during our upcoming winter break to rest and also to take care of yourselves, your families, and each other. My hope for next year is that school personnel receive the vaccine sooner than later. I know I plan to take the vaccine when it's publicly available. In the meantime, please wear a mask, social distance, and wash your hands frequently. Together, our personal actions will help reduce transmission over the holidays, and we will continue reinventing public education each and every day. It's been a challenging year, and it's going to be tough for a little while longer. But if we can keep working together and helping each other stay safe, we can start 2021 stronger than ever. Next on our agenda is trustee accolades and committee reports. This item is scheduled each month to allow trustees to lift up some of the good work of teachers, students, and schools in the district. We will also use this time to educate the full board and the public on the work happening within board committees by asking board chairs and our designees on external groups to provide a brief update on any recent committee meetings or discussions. We will start with our accolades. Trustees, is there anything you would like to share? Trustee Cindy Anderson, and then Trustee Letitia Anderson, then Trustee Ashe, and then Trustee Singh, and then Trustee Ellens, Wagner, Zapata, and Foster. Yep.
Okay. On November 10th, the Austin Chamber of Commerce celebrated outstanding performance in college readiness efforts throughout the Austin region at the 2020 State of Talent and Education Awards program. Austin ISD was recognized as having the greatest improvement in direct-to-college enrollment for a school district at 61%, up 3.10 percentage points. Additionally, 3 individual AISD high schools received recognition in the following categories. The first is Garza for highest Apply Texas submission rate by enrollment. Second is Eastside Memorial, highest Apply Texas submission rate by enrollment, greatest improvement in direct-to-college enrollment for a high school campus. And lastly, Ann Richards for the highest Apply Texas submission rate by enrollment, highest FAFSA submission rate by enrollment, highest senior survey participation rate by enrollment, and the highest overall direct-to-college enrollment for a high school campus at 89%. So congratulations to Garza, Eastside Memorial, and Ann Richards. Thank you.
Gus Garcia Young Men's Leadership Academy students have been participating in the Coder Z League competition, an online robotics and coding tournament for students across North America to program 3D robots and compete challenging and educational missions. The Garza STEM Club, aka Atomic Dragons, finished 12th overall out of 64 teams in the regional preliminary competition. Gus Garcia team members, I'm sorry, I apologize if I'm gonna say this wrong. I really do apologize. Dadman, this is horrible. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm sorry. Ramanula, I hope I'm saying that right, and I apologize if I'm saying that wrong, scored 2 first-place codes, placing him as one of the top 2 coders in the region. And then I'm gonna follow up. Trustee Singh and I switched because I had 2, and this is some from across the district related to outdoor learning spaces. As campuses explore new ways to navigate the challenges of the pandemic, many teachers are finding instructional success with outdoor learning spaces. Here are just a few examples from across the district. Cook and Odom Elementary are 2 local schools selected as part of the city's Connecting Children to Nature initiative in partnership with the Austin Parks and Rec. The grant allowed for outdoor classroom seating made of tree stumps, limestone, and mulch. Ridgetop Elementary Principal Cara Schultz would like to highlight her fantastic parents and the work they have done to provide Ridgetop with multiple outdoor learning spaces this semester. They are working on 2 additional covered spaces to get ready soon. Gillette Elementary PTA has added 3 outdoor classrooms to their learning spaces. They have built flexible student seating that can be used as either benches or desks. Small Middle School called for donations last school year and was overwhelmed with the community generosity. Lots of hard work went into the new outdoor classroom. Small Middle School teachers cannot wait for their students to utilize this great learning space. St. Elmo Elementary has been awarded funds to implement a 2nd year of the Monarch Butterfly Grant. The National Wildlife Federation has worked to assist schools in the creation of schoolyard habitats, which creates and restores wildlife habitats on school grounds while providing outdoor classrooms for learning across the curriculum.
And so it's my turn to get to speak about some wonderful things happening in our district. And the last time we did this, I actually spoke about the journalism program at McCallum High School and was extending the incredible praises to the amazing staff and all of their hard work. And this time I get to actually recognize some of the students. So I wanted to extend an incredible congratulations to the MAC journalism team for earning countless awards from various publication associations for the work done on The Shield, which is their online news magazine of McCallum High School. And here are some of McCallum's top journalism awards. the 2020 National Scholastic Press Association Pacemaker Award, and they were a national finalist. There was an individual award for Photo of the Year. Caleb Melville got first place. And I will do another little plug and say if you follow them on Instagram, you won't be sorry. They have some incredible photos that they put there. Best use of social media and best reporting, first place. They had the 2020 Columbia Scholastic Press Association Gold Circle Awards. Ellen Fox and Julia K. Smith, Sports News, first place. Samantha Powers and Bella Russo, Headline Writing, first place. Angus Sewell McCann, Cultural Feature, first place. They also received 2020 School Newspapers Online Awards as a distinguished site, and the 2020 Interscholastic Press League Conference Awards Award of Distinguished Merit. Congratulations to that incredible department.
Thank you, Trustee. Trustee.
Okay, so my accolade is about LASA. 3 LASA students have been named the 2021 Young Arts Foundation Award winners, joining 659 of the most accomplished young visual, literary, and performing artists from across the country. And I'm pleased to say the 3 people were Reiran Jiang for classical music and violin, who got an honorable mention. Shreya Ramanathan, World Dance, honorable mention, and Keshav Srinivasan, classical music, violin, and got a merit for that. Young Arts Award winners gain access to one of the most comprehensive programs for artists in the United States, in which they will have opportunities for financial, creative, and professional development support throughout their entire careers. Thank you. And great job.
Fabulous. I have 2 recognitions tonight for Austin ISD students, teachers, staff, and families who are helping others celebrate the holidays. First, the Barton Hills Choir. I'm sure you've all seen them at some point. You will get to see them here in a minute, I hope. They continued their tradition of opening the annual Zilker Park Holiday Tree Lighting Ceremony on November 29th. This year was a little different, as you can expect. The choir performed virtually through Zoom with the help of a professional band. The choir sang Jingle Bell Rock and Winter Wonderland. If you missed the live virtual performance, you could still watch it. That sounds really not live virtual performance, sorry. You can still watch it on the Barton Hills Choir website or on the City of Austin Zilker Park website. I'm also going to ask that we play a short clip tonight of one of their songs for the board and the public. Oh, thank you. That was really great, yes. I do want to just recognize their teacher. Gavin Tabone has been leading this choir for years, and they are incredible if you get a chance to see them in person ever again someday. Second, the Junior League of Austin completed its annual Coats for Kids drive this past Saturday. They handed out more than 2,800 coats to Central Austin kids. Multiple Austin ISD campuses took part in running their own coat drives to raise money and donate coats for this year's Coats for Kids drive. Austin ISD staff also helped with coat distribution, with a special shout out to our parent support specialists who worked directly with families to make sure kids got the coats in the sizes, colors, and styles they needed. The Junior League named O. Henry this year's middle school coat drive competition winner. O. Henry's Drive was led by their National Junior Honor Society, who organized the collections and brought out volunteers for collecting and sorting. Thank you to O. Henry and to all other schools for providing Coats for Kids in Austin. Thank you also to the Junior League and its Coats for Kids volunteer team under the guidance of Chair Rachel Pry, who is also a proud Austin ISD parent. Finally, thank you to Austin ISD Warehouse Manager Mark Curtis for helping coordinate the delivery of over 8,000 coats to AISD students, just in time for this cold snap. So thank you very much.
Well, first off, I wanted to say a big congratulations and thank you to Ms. Lala Beecham, the principal of Mills Elementary School, who will be retiring in December. She will be greatly missed by the Mills community, but thank you, Ms. Beecham, for all of your service to AISD. I also wanted to congratulate the students at Bowie High School in the journalism department. The Dispatch, which is the Bowie's newspaper, which I love getting at my house and being able to read now all the time, earned its third straight Pacemaker Award from the National Scholastic Press Association. So that award places the news site in the top 24 publications in the nation. Bowie Journalism also participated in multiple competitions at the virtual convention that was hosted by the National Scholastic Press Association and the Journalism Education Association in November. And Bowie's, to top all of that off, Bowie's Dispatch earned its first ever Best in Show with a ninth place spot in the online contest for large schools. The Bowie Yearbook also had a great award too. For the 2020 yearbook, they were announced as a crown winner by the Columbia Scholastic Press Association. And that places them as one of only 41 high school yearbooks in the country that got that award. So great work coming out of Bowie Journalism and Yearbook as well. And I also wanted to make note of the Austin Ed Fund grant at Boone Elementary School that allowed every Boone pre-K student to have access to important materials for hands-on, developmentally appropriate work. So each of the pre-K students at Boone received a toolbox with materials ranging from social emotional learning kits, such as calming timers, yoga mats, academic materials that they can use in small group lessons. And those kits ensure that every student has an opportunity to participate, whether they're learning remotely or they're on the campus. And the kits have been really helpful in helping those students stay safe and engaged during what we know is a really challenging time. So thank you to the Austin Ed Fund for that grant.
Thank you.
So, Met Sanchez Elementary School, in the online performance robots course from the Texas Performing Arts Sonic Studio, University of Texas at Austin, and Met Sanchez Elementary students are working together to design and build programmable robots that can be controlled remotely. Second grade teacher and robot club sponsor, Eva Rosenthal, and I apologize if I didn't say that right, developed a STEM-centered lesson plan. Her students have worked throughout the semester to create robot drawings and stories. And the UT students are bringing those robot designs to life. Last week, UT student robot builders shared their final version of 5 of the 10 robots that the Met School students designed. On Wednesday, December 16th, they will present the final 5 robots. The Met Sanchez students will have a chance to control their robots online during the show. Congratulations. Thank you.
So I love when our students have the opportunity for engagement beyond our campus. campuses action research, critical conversations, et cetera. So it's in this light that I want to celebrate the first ever Student Equity Council that was convened on December 11th. The AISD Cultural Proficiency and Inclusiveness Department hosted the district's first ever Student Equity Council, funded by St. David's Foundation. The council will empower students for crucial engagement in social studies, collaboration, civic engagement, and action research. Under the leadership and the team of Dr. Angela Ward, students are leaning into tough conversations about race and the intersections of identity. It's really good work.
Thank you, trustees. Tonight, I want to recognize two amazing students in my district. First, I want to congratulate lively 8th grade student Celeste Palacios, who will be performing with Teatro Vivo for the second year in a row. Teatro Vivo is a local theater company dedicated to producing quality bilingual theater accessible to all audiences. Celeste is performing in Rupert Reyes's Cuento Navideño, a bilingual holiday comedy that is a twist on the traditional Christmas carols, December 10th through December 20th. This festive show infuses Latino culture, Spanish language, and Latino holiday traditions in a performance to be enjoyed by the whole familia. I also want to recognize Ann Richards' class of 2021 senior Lisbeth Frausto on her Quest Bridge scholarship match with Yale University. I actually had the opportunity to see that on Instagram, one of my first times on Instagram, and showing the video where she learned about her 4-year tuition, books, room, and board, valued at over $300,000, all covered by QuestBridge scholarship. Lisbeth will be a first-generation college student next fall, and she said, being matched with Yale through QuestBridge means that my biggest dreams are coming true. And in the process, I am opening doors for my Ann Richards School sisters to come. I am the first Ann Richards student to receive admission at Yale University, but surely not the last. Congratulations, Elizabeth. We will now move on to our committee and group reports. Trustee Eshi, could you provide a report for the policy committee?
Certainly, I'm happy to. We met on December the 3rd and discussed several policies. In fact, we are voting on several of them tonight as we discussed them at our last information session. FNG local has to do with the grievance process, and we took a look at that one on this previous Monday. EL local is looking at our campus and program charters and what those contracts look like and how we have that in our policy. BE local is looking at our board meetings, and we discussed the move of the board meetings to Thursdays beginning in January or once we vote. And that we, with the understanding that BE local will be coming back to the policy committee to discuss the changes for agenda building and other instances, other details such as those. And then we also just discussed DGB local, which has to do with employee rights and privileges, as well as personnel management, and we'll be taking another look at that policy in upcoming meetings. And we asked for an update on our social media policy and are looking forward to getting a draft for that soon. We will also be looking at EIE local, which is academic achievement around retention and promotion. We'll be looking at EIC local, which is around academic achievement and class ranking. We will also be looking at FD local, which is around admissions. And the other two policies are BQA and BQB, and I apologize for not having the details of what those policies are about. We were informed that administration will be bringing those to us to discuss at our next policy meeting. So with that, I think that covers everything that we discussed.
Thank you, Trustee Eshi. Our audit committee chair was recently vacated with the end of Trustee Tice's term. Trustee Wagner has agreed to serve as an interim chair until the full board can discuss committee assignments. And thank you for your service, Trustee Wagner. Could you provide a report for the audit committee?
Sure. Sorry, I am not prepared. Let me pull it up. Actually, would it be possible to come back to me after the
Yes.
next committee report?
And then I wasn't sure if we needed a report on any other groups like API or Trustee Singh?
Sure. So Austin Partners in Education, as many of you know, is a collaboration with Austin ISD, Austin Community College, and the Austin Chamber of Commerce. And we, at our last meeting on November 18th, we had a wonderful presentation on the evaluation of API. And for those of you who don't know, API has 3 primary programs. One is math classroom coaching, the other is college readiness, and the third is the Gear Up partnership. And across all 3 of these programs, API served about 2,300 students in grades 6 and up. And of course, the pandemic, brought some challenges to their work, and they really adapted really well, in my opinion. They had obviously been doing face-to-face work with students, and they kind of adapted to online tutoring and mentoring. And they also worked with a lot of different teachers to help them move their classes online. And the evaluations show that our API students did better than matched comparison groups on a number of college and career readiness indicators. And we're just really super proud of that work, and I'm glad to be part of that partnership. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Trustee Verde?
All right, now I'm prepared. Thank you for coming back to me. So for the audit committee, the trustees that were in attendance were Trustee Tyke, Trustee Ellens, Trustee Ashe, and myself. We discussed the revised 2021 audit plan, which will be voted on this evening, which I think all trustees have in their materials. We also reviewed CFC local and CFC exhibit, which includes new language defining a significant deficiency for investigation. The language will come from the internal audit manual to add there around the definition of a finding or a deficiency. We also reviewed KPIs and a director evaluation method, since the audit director is one of 2 employees which report to the board, so we are also responsible for evaluating his performance.
Thank you. Trustees, any other updates? Trustees about that?
I just want for the record that on the policy for moving the meeting to Thursdays is still, I still have a conflict up to the end of January. So I just wanted to put that out there that if possible, we would start in February.
Okay, we'll have that discussion in the, when we vote, but I really appreciate you sharing that. The last item, I know that the Austin Ed Fund has not met since our last meeting, but I did want to share that they do have an end of the year drive, and I can't thank that board and Michelle Wallace, the executive director, and all of the staff for all the hard work they've done in raising funds for our families and for our students during the pandemics, and I really appreciate all the hard work that they're doing. And with that, I'm going to move to our next item, which is the superintendent's report and information on our Open for Learning plan. Dr. Elizalde.
Thank you, President Rodriguez. I would like to just take a minute before I begin my report, and I'd like to take a moment to think about in memory of Willie Young from Wynn Montessori. Wynn Elementary lost its beloved head custodian, Mr. Willie Young, in September. We lost a great person with a heart of gold. He was taken too young, and it was so unexpected. The feelings of loss are raw for many staff and families. He was truly the rock of the school. He greeted the children every day at the front step with a warm smile, open arms, handshakes, and fist bumps, whatever they needed to feel safe and secure. Parents relied on his warmth as they passed their child off to him every single day. He was dedicated to the kids, and you knew he cared for each and every one of them. This time of year, Mr. Young would have been the Santa in our pictures with Santa. Mr. Young's contribution to the community was remarkable, and he will not be forgotten. I'd also like to make a statement in memory of Lisa Marie Reed, Pecan Springs and Wynn Elementary. Austin Independent School District and the Pecan Springs Learning Community remember the life, death, and legacy of cafe worker Lisa Marie Reed. Lisa Marie Reed died peacefully at her mother's home on Thursday, October 22nd, 2020. Lisa was born in Yoakum, Texas on October 28, 1967, to Mr. Alvin Sr. and Mrs. Alice DeVoe. In 1969, her parents moved the family to Austin, Texas. Lisa was a proud product of Austin ISD and later graduated from Anderson High in 1987. Lisa's passion for shaping the lives of children led her to Austin ISD in 1997. Over the course of the 23 years she was employed with the district, she touched the lives of many individuals while working at Wynn, Andrews, Reagan, Pierce, Harris, and Pecan Springs. What was most memorable about Lisa's life was her positivity. Her perspective was uplifting and encouraging. Lisa Marie Reed will forever be missed. And as I move also into my report, I would like to take a moment prior to this winter break and recognize all of our team members, all of our staff, regardless of the position. And I want to take a moment to thank them, to our custodians, to our maintenance employees, whether they're plumbers or electricians or assistants, whether they work in construction, to our food service employees in preparing food for our children, the most nutritious and good tasting food, by the way, that I've had, along with our leaders on campuses, instructional coaches, assistant principals, principals, to our folks who work in a central location, whether they're part of a White Fleet or our bus drivers, and of course, to our teachers who have been working remote, in person, remote, 24/7, 60 to 80 hours a week, dealing with all of the changes that occur because of COVID. So I would like to take a moment to read a piece from Taylor Malley, but I'm going to adjust it as if it were an experience that I had had myself. So let's pretend for just a moment for our teachers. I was at a dinner party, and the dinner guests were sitting around the table discussing life. One man, a CEO, decided to explain the problem with education. He argued, "What's a kid going to learn from someone who decided his best option in life was to become a teacher?" he said to another guest. Then he said to me, "You're a teacher, Stephanie," he said. "Be honest. What do you make?" Well, I do have a reputation of honesty and frankness, and I have this rule that when someone asks me for the truth, I feel compelled to share it. So I replied, "You want to know what I make? I make kids work harder than they ever thought they could. I can make a C+ feel like a Congressional Medal of Honor, and I can make an A- feel like a slap in the face if the student didn't do his or her very best. You want to know what I make? I make kids wonder. I make them question. I make them criticize. I make them apologize and mean it. I make them write. I make them read, and read. I make them show all of their work in math and hide it all on their final drafts in English. I elevate them to experience music and art and the joy in performance, so their lives are rich, full of kindness and culture, and they take pride in themselves and their accomplishments. I make them understand that if you have the brains, then follow your heart. And if someone ever tries to judge you by what you make, you pay them no attention. You want to know what I make? I make a difference. And by the way, Mr. CEO, what do you make? As I reflected on this poem by Taylor Malley, it reminded me of our teachers. They do this for our students every single day. When a student does their very best, they recognize them and they praise them for it. And when our students have more to give, they find a way to draw it out of them. So at this time of year, to all of our team members, and certainly to our teachers, I know all of you, and I thank them for all of the work they have done and continue to do. We know that the vaccine is here, but we know it is still months away from when we will all be able to benefit. We did get news that our teachers will be in the second phase because they know how important our teachers are to our schools. And so the lobbying that we did collectively, our voices were heard, and teachers will in fact be in phase 2. And with that, I will begin and try to be as brief as I can. If I can have the presentation, please. Slide 2. As an overview, last week we did have 56 confirmed positives. We also had more than 3 cases at any one location, which would be Anderson High School. All of these are related to an extracurricular team sport, and therefore we are in constant communication with Austin Public Health. At this time, they do believe that because of the identification of the individuals involved, it is isolated to this one particular activity. I do want to compare on our next slide, as we illustrated last week, that 69, which was the total number of our highest number of COVID cases, did come immediately following our Thanksgiving break. And so the following week, this past week, we did have 56, which was lower, but still would be the second highest that we have had since we have begun school September the 8th. A snapshot on the following slide with regard to our testing. Keep in mind, of course, that week 4 was the week when we had our drive-through testing process. So that is why those numbers are large. And the week prior to that, if you recall, was the Austin High week, when we also did quite a bit of testing drive-through when we did shutter that campus for 3 days. Next, slide 5 is one I want us to just for a moment recognize. This is the data that continue to be concerning with regard to whether we might hit stage 5 in Austin, Travis County. So you can see that the positivity rate is still going up. New cases in the last 14 days are still going up. Average cases still going up. The UT modeling of average reproduction estimate is still going up. 14-day change rate is still going up. Obviously, what you see here is all red arrows because all of the indications are that we are still moving closer to stage 5. So what does that mean? On slide 6, I want to just illustrate that TEA once again changed some guidance after the CDC changed guidance on quarantining. I do want to spend just a minute here. The CDC changed their quarantining time not based on the fact that they thought 10 days was a new science. the evidence was that very few individuals actually stay the 14-day course. And so their reasoning or their rationale, if you read their actual writing, is that if they went to 10 days, that perhaps holistically we'd have more people sticking to 10 days because they're not sticking to 14. And that the largest percentage of cases do appear between day 0 and day 10. The large number, not all of them. So TEA then made some changes because there are some school districts that are suffering, creating a hardship from teachers that are out because they're being quarantined and are out for 14 days. Austin Public Health combined those two. Austin Independent School District will not make any changes. We will adhere to the 14 days of quarantining, period. We will err on the side of needing to take more time to ensure that we do not have individuals back on campus or at any facility that still might pose a threat, however minimal that might be. So with regard to our next slide, keeping all things in perspective, we have now reached a total of 1,280 requests on our accommodations. 94 are still pending some additional information. There were an additional 25 or 26 rather approved, so that moves our total approval to 75. You can see the different area of category of employee. And we are still in the process of having conversations. From our last conversation, there are a couple of things that we did make adjustments to. One is the Benefits Review Committee now does include our Director of Health Services. So we have added a member to that group. We also are still engaging with our employees, including having conversations with them via phone to explain what the reason is for the accommodation that was requested not being approved, providing alternate accommodations, and/or requesting additional documentation from their physicians. We also do have a grievance or an appeals process in place. If after working with Human Capital, there is still a need for an appeals, there is an appeals process. It is on our website, but we can also have anyone contact individuals at Human Capital so they can provide support to any of our employees who may need assistance with regard to the accommodations. I did just want to provide that update, and we are going to continue to work on seeing what types of alternates or approvals we might be able to work through. Slide 8. Let's move to thinking proactively. There is a possibility of being in stage 5, as was demonstrated a few slides prior to that, utilizing the Austin-Travis County data. This could result in some recommendations or even requirements by Austin Public Health. I did not want to wait until January or in the middle of the winter break to have this conversation. I certainly apologize if the survey was put out at a time that was not feasible. It was only intended to provide individuals as much time as possible to respond, and it is open until Thursday. We left it open until Thursday so we can analyze the data before providing a decision on Friday. If we go into stage 5, Austin Public Health will first want us to immediately suspend all extracurricular activities. That will be the first layer that will be applied. Depending on how long we stay in stage 5, could result then in the recommendation or a requirement of schools being closed. If we were to close, let's say based on Austin Public Health's guidance, we would want to again provide testing for our community and staff members that would qualify at our locations at Burger Stadium and at the Delco Activity Center, so we could have 2 large areas. We have already visited with our Seton staff, along with our own health services, so that we could bring individuals together to do that Thursday through Friday, if in fact we do not reopen schools as expected on January 4th. January 4th is a student holiday, but a teacher staff workday. January 5th would be the first day students would return on campus regularly. Now, there are a few exceptions to that because of our District of Innovation calendars. Some campuses actually don't have students starting until January the 6th. So we did, in fact, send out a survey to parents and staff asking about options. Let me see if I can walk through the realities of where we are. As you all recall, when we closed from a proactive measure the week following Thanksgiving, the Texas Education Agency initially was not going to provide us any credit for being 100% remote. So when I say we closed only to on-campus. We did remain 100% remote. However, the commissioner elected to meet us part of the way by only saying we were in violation for 50% of that time. Please keep in mind, that was not my decision, obviously. That is the way in which the Texas Education Agency interpreted the fact that I did not adhere to being available to in-person or on-campus instruction that week. In addition, there could have been a loss of approximately $15 million in funding for that week. I will be providing you some information that I received from the commissioner regarding some information that I have to attest with regard to ensuring that we follow the Texas Education Agency's expectations. So as we move into January, and in addition to that, the commissioner has also indicated he would work with us in not making us make up that 50% or 2.5 days during this school year. He will currently allow us to do that as we plan the calendar for the following school year. Anytime you talk about adding time, I recognize that teachers in particular who are on a paid contracted daily rate may be thinking that this is additional time added to their calendar. Our thoughts would be not to add to their calendar, simply to replace some of the professional development time and switch that to instructional delivery during the next school year, so they would not have additional days of employment. Now back to this year. This is why I'm concerned that if we were to go 100% remote the week of January 4th, that we would once again be in a situation that we would be in violation of the Texas Education Agency. If we close completely, we're not in violation, but that does mean that there were 4 instructional days for students that still have to be made up somewhere because no one worked. If we're completely closed the week of January 4th, right, no one's employed. In other words, instead of having 2 weeks for the winter break, you would have 3 weeks of a winter break. So where do those 4 days go? You still have to abide by the number of minutes that are required for funding. That would mean we would have to add it to the end. We would have to add Saturdays. We would have to add take away spring break. So part of this was simply to garner what people's thinking was, should we be in that situation? the next slide, we have already received, and we've probably received even more than this. We have already received over 9,000 parental family responses, and we've received over 3,300 staff responses. So about a third of our overall staff, if you think about, about 9,000 employees, about 10,000 employees. 66% of our families, of the respondents actually, would prefer that we do remote off-campus learning. On-campus learning, 34%. If Austin moves to stage 5 and we actually have to close, most individuals in this particular response group, there's still a lot of responses out, would still lean towards having some remote learning. However, when you look at the calendar adjustments, if we had to make some adjustments, regardless of whether it's family or staff, based again on the number of surveys we've received to date, you can see that the first choice still seems to be at the end of the school year. Many of the comments that we received on the parent side of the survey talk about it being very difficult to go 6 days out of the week, that children are currently already feeling very stressed, that it would also be difficult to not look forward to a spring break. Now, the best case scenario then is we don't close, we don't have just remote, and we're able to open January the 4th for a teacher work day, professional development day, and students for the most part coming on January 5th, then none of this has to be dealt with. Now, I'm not indicating that we should make a decision now. I'm only wanting to make sure I have a moment to explain what is happening, because we have too many responses that are still out that we need to continue to get. So just a moment for me to maybe recap. The only reason we would close would be because we have received medical advice that would tell us we would need to close. Now, we could close in two ways. You can close completely, or you can close to on-campus instruction, which allows you to do remote instruction, of which we would still have to make up 2 days if the commissioner, and this is a big if the commissioner were to say, okay, I'm going to let you do it one more time. I don't believe the commissioner is going to let us do this one more time. Please keep in mind, we were the only school district that did the preemption of not having school after the Thanksgiving holiday. No one else went to 100% remote. So I illustrate that simply because I recognize that many of you may be taking some questions from individuals about why we're not pushing back on the Texas Education Agency. And we did push back on the Texas Education Agency. And so we do find ourselves in a situation of, are we going to risk that one more time? And what that could mean. You do realize it could also mean that he could say, I'm not going to let you do 50% of what I said back from November, because that was only if you said you're not going to continue this pattern. So there are no easy answers. I simply want to make sure all of the information is out there so I can take questions in just a minute. So we'll all take a deep breath. And we'll go quickly to slide 11, things you already know. The STAR assessment, which is being redundant because assessment is in. That's why STAR is a double A, not a double R. So STAR tests will proceed for spring of 2021. However, the A through F ratings will not be in place for the 2020-2021 school year, and it is due to the ongoing issues and effects that COVID-19 has. And however, that does mean the Texas Education Agency still has to get permission from the federal accountability group to say that we're good. We are in the process of continuing to work with campuses on slide 12. With the Education Austin proposal, Bowie seems to be in a good spot, and Richard seems to be in a good spot. I'm waiting to get those plans so that we can share those with other campuses, so we'll look at doing that tomorrow. Cunningham Elementary is in a very good spot. Padron is also working together, and so is Burnett. Burnett's taking a little bit longer. They're having more communication with their staff as they design and develop their plan. And so I do want to just reiterate the survey, and when I asked our team, I will of course take responsibility. When I asked our team to send the surveys out, I then said, oh, don't forget to leave a free response section or open for comments. I did intend that to be for both surveys. It only got attached to the family survey. In no way was that intended to minimize the responses from staff. We'll be happy to take any comments that they may have. And that, I think, pretty much sums up the challenges that we're facing this week. And I want to just, again, use that to illustrate how much our staff members, our teachers, our support staff have to deal with every time we change the direction or a different decision or a different choice is being provided by the agency or by the CDC or by Austin Public Health, and how that impacts how their day-to-day operation runs. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Elizalde. Trustees, any questions? Trustee Letitia Anderson and then Trustee Cindy Anderson.
Where do I start? You asked some questions, but I continue to be frustrated. I mean, the whole rationale for the closing after Thanksgiving, like, okay, never mind. But I wanted to say, because I actually was going to ask about the vaccine. I'll be getting vaccinated this week. I feel like I have a responsibility to my family, and I just absolutely will not be able to live with myself if I took the position that I started to take, which is that I wasn't going to get it, and then I end up giving it to my child or to my mother or to my uncle. So, you know, I'm stepping out of my comfort zone a little bit, and I'm getting vaccinated this week. So that's my responsibility. I owe that to my family, and I owe that to the people that be around me. And I would hope others would consider that as well. But back to the online learning. Do you see any indication, not that you have a crystal ball anywhere, but the levels going up into stage 5 while we're on winter break, and you needing to act quickly, so to speak?
So I get to, we all get to hear the report to, not everybody gets to hear it, but there will be a report 10 a.m. tomorrow by Austin Public Health to the Commissioner's Court again every Tuesday. They'll have more data tomorrow. Right now, it is still looking like it's a possibility. Today's numbers were all increasing, but they were not increasing as fast as they had been increasing. And so today is when I just asked, and I'm not the only superintendent on the call, but I did ask the question completely just honestly from Dr. Escott. If we go to stage 5, are you going to be recommending that schools be closed? And he said, it will depend on how long we stay in stage 5. That the first thing that will happen is we will need to suspend extracurricular activities, which makes complete sense. Right now, the challenge with extracurricular activities is, especially if you're into the playoffs, we end up, if you do not play, you forfeit. And it's very simple for us who are not engaged directly, but we do have some of our students who may be looking, even if it's a small division school that may have been looking for some scholarships. We're not in the playoffs any longer, unfortunately, but the LBJ Jaguars did make it all the way, and we should have congratulated them. My apologies. They did a really great job in representing us and lost by a last-minute field goal. Nonetheless, in basketball, it's a lot easier to just say we'll reschedule a game as opposed to getting deep into the playoffs when it really becomes difficult for some of our students. None of this is easy. We will be suspending, currently, we are now going to be suspending any participation at any other events by all of the other groups that like to support our teams, of course, cheerleading band, dance team, drill team, etc., to minimize the exposure at extracurricular activities. So it is very difficult to tell what's going to happen from day to day. And right now, I want to continue to see what the numbers do between now and Thursday before we decide what direction we're going to recommend we go.
Thank you.
I've got a couple of questions for you. The first one, thank you for the update, by the way. The first one has to do with when you mentioned the second phase of the vaccines and it being accessible to teachers. I was wondering if that also included accessibility to classified staff, because you only mentioned teachers, and so I wanted to see if that meant that our other staff would have the opportunity.
The way it was explained to us was it would be any of our staff members that have the most direct contact with students, and that we are to help provide that prioritization. So for instance, if we have teacher assistants who are working with our special needs students, that would be a priority over others, teachers that work with special needs students, bus drivers that may be carrying a variety of students on a daily basis, custodians who are working to clean areas after students have been in particular rooms. So the next identifier that they want us to look at is age in terms of prioritization because of the percentages of the severity of the illness based in its correlation to age. So after we identify the positions, so in a nutshell, yes, it includes anyone that's working with students in any capacity, but the districts are actually being given the autonomy to help tier within the organization what's first priority, second priority, and they're just giving us guidance.
Okay, so that just actually gave me another question. So is the district limited to the number of vaccines that they get? Because part of why I'm asking that is because we've got staff that is involved in face-to-face instructional delivery as well as those associated supports, like you mentioned, bus drivers, food service workers, custodians, et cetera. And then we've got another set of staff that are delivering through virtual instruction that are saying that they really would like to have access to that before they come back. And so are we going to run into a scenario where that may be in a later phase for those that aren't currently interacting with students? Or I guess I don't have any feel for how many individual vaccines that we'll have the availability for. Do you have any idea yet?
No, we do not. We do not have an idea of how many. We also don't have any direction from either the governor's office or the Texas Education Agency other than just what Austin Public Health told us about their recommendations.
Sure.
They have met with the Texas they being Austin Public Health did in fact meet with the Texas Education Agency as early as today, and are continuing to work with regard to the plan. And it has not been defined how many, whether they recommend, that was the recommendation coming from Austin Public Health. We have yet to hear if there's any direction from the Texas Education Agency or the governor's office.
Sure, that's helpful, thank you. My second question has to do with, in your conversations with the commissioner, what has been his rationale for only providing 50% credit for learning for the week after Thanksgiving? Because I know I'm not the only one who's having difficulty understanding, how is that different from the 8 weeks that we were virtual? You still have teachers teaching full-time and students participating full-time. So what's the difference?
So it is considered a violation of offering access to all students. So the minute that we did not have on-campus instruction, regardless of the rationale, we did not offer on-campus instruction, and we are not within a zone like El Paso that specifically has some metrics that are just, they're way out there. And so because of that, I did not comply, which did say I could close individual schools because I don't have enough staff. But I can't do that proactively. I have to wait, I have to show up on Monday, and I have to go, whoa, we don't have enough people over Thanksgiving, let's say, because let's say people were exposed over the Thanksgiving break. And we show up, and I need, to make it simple, I need 10 teachers, and we only have 5. And I say, there's no way I can safely provide instruction. So on Monday morning, I can say, we're not going to offer it, and it doesn't count against us. And I can do that for up to 14 days. But I can only do that site to site. So the challenge for me there is, am I going to call parents on a Monday morning and tell them that for 2 weeks, we're not offering on-campus instruction? Mm-hmm. And then when we say it's only valued at 50%, that's not the value I'm putting on it. That's what the Texas Education Agency is saying they're working with us on, because originally they said if it doesn't count, because I didn't offer that for the entire 5 days, that we would actually need to make up 5 school days. And so that will add to our budget because teachers are already working over and above. So if I have to add 5 days, we absolutely will have to pay for those additional days. And we are talking in excess of $1 million easily, just for even a small percentage of our staff. So we'd really have to go back and look at our budget in order to do that. Because no one, as it is, we know that our staff, teachers and support staff, all of our staff are going above and beyond. But if you're actually adding days to a teacher contract, we absolutely need to pay them for those days. That is not my intent at all right now.
Right. Okay, so what I heard you say is that it has nothing to do with how many minutes of learning we are actually providing, but rather it was more of a penalty for not abiding by the standards set by TEA and the state for when you get to say, I have to close.
That's correct.
Okay. So if someone were interested in advocating to TEA, the thing to advocate on would be to include criteria for those circumstances to where you are listening to the local health authority's recommendation about face-to-face learning.
That would be extremely helpful.
Okay.
If they were to say, if Austin Public Health says this and we do that, that would be, okay, we're not going to penalize the school district because they were following the recommendations of the medical experts. But currently, just as a reminder, our lieutenant governor specifically said that was not in the auspices of the Austin Public, of any health authority, that had to come from the governor's office.
Gotcha. So again, just to be clear, if folks want to advocate, it's to advocate for including the criteria for virtual learning on the advice of a local health authority. Thank you for that. The last, well, one comment, one question I have to do with STAR, and I don't know if everybody who's watching tonight was watching during the information meeting, but I just want to say that I really appreciated the discussion we had about explaining the different domains with STAR. And I know there's a lot of folks that are like, why do you care about STAR? Why are you paying attention? And we pay attention because we have to, because if we don't, schools can be closed. And so I think it's important, again, for you to just mention really briefly that, again, for folks that are advocating right now, and the commissioner has already said that STAR will happen, it's just not going to count for accountability purposes. Still administering the STAR is good for us because it gives you the opportunity at a campus level to qualify in both the achievement as well as the 2 growth categories. Because without a comparison of the data and not having any measure for growth, you kind of got to put all your eggs in one basket, and you don't have as much flexibility to have a passing accountability rating. Does that?
It is absolutely correct, and if I could use this then as a moment to also reiterate, STAR is not what we have to worry about. It's the way in which we deliver instruction. The more we are focused on worksheets and ensuring that we're test-taking skills, we need to ensure that we're focused on the standards that, yes, are being assessed, but let's focus on the standards so that we will be able to have an environment in which students have a love for learning, whether it's thematic or conceptually based instruction, where students are engaged in discovering their learning and the teacher really gets to facilitate and enjoy what he or she is doing as opposed to worksheets. And those are some of the very things that I see our schools who actually need more support. We actually need to support them in the areas of not having worksheets, of not getting away from field trips. Those are the very things that those schools need more of, are those real life experiences that make the work relevant so that our students don't see learning as work, but see learning as joy. And so those things go together with the perspective of, we want STAR for the purposes of being able to plan ahead of the game for the 21-22 school year accountability. And this allows us to have a floor which we can then measure the success of our students. But we don't measure that success by going to, this is how we're going to do it. And I know that throughout the rest of this next semester, we're going to have opportunities to bring to you examples of what I'm just talking about.
Thank you for that. So the last comment I have has to do with, if folks are going to advocate to TEA about STAR, right now it seems like our biggest opportunity area is that most districts did not choose to continue virtual learning through the end of the school year like Austin. And there are typically very strict protocols around administering a STAR test. And I know they've given us 5 days instead of 3 days for a typical window to administer a test. But the challenge that we have is so many of our students are learning virtually. And right now, there is no way, according to the state, to administer STAR virtually. So it seems like we could perhaps, again, if folks are looking for a way to help, advocate for providing some guidance and flexibility in being able to do that, because the realities of the logistics, the number of bodies, the number of spaces, and the additional cost to the district to bring everyone in, and not that we could necessarily even do that. I mean, you know, parents have to make the best decision for their children. We're kind of in a quandary in that respect. And we have makeup tests that are sort of already going on, and then your typical STAR windows open back up for non-makeups or retakes in what, March for English?
That's correct, because they start early on in order for us, even the writing component, for instance, will have to be administered early on.
Right, so we have a few short months to try to gain some assistance in having protocols that would enable us as a district to offer virtual test taking for STAR.
Yes, ma'am, and accessibility to broadband
Yeah,
would be like really important, just in terms of being able to have our students even have access to real authentic learning.
sure.
But if we don't have an extension of the window, along with being able to have students in different areas, we're not going to force anyone to come in to take STAR that does not want their child to come in and do that. That is not going to be our stance. We think there's some benefits if we utilize it correctly. But this isn't going to be something that we're going to say that individuals must come and do. But you're right, the longer the time frame we have to administer the window, the better off we're going to be. I know that that infringes on the agency's perspective of what is test security.
Sure.
So there are pros and cons to, obviously to that, but we know that our students need additional time in order for us to have fewer people, fewer students in an area being able to test.
So, and this is my last question, I think, but you just raised another question for me, I apologize. So based on what you just said, typically in a normal environment with STAR, students, if they're ill that day, it doesn't necessarily count against the district or the campus in the same way that I suspect it might if, we have some schools that have the majority of their population learning virtually right now. And so if campuses only have a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen students that are in a face-to-face environment actually take the test, is there a penalty right now?
So in any other time, there is a penalty because there is a certain testing participation that is required. So it's not just your outcome,
Right.
it's how many students participate. This year, because there is no A through F rating, and that's part of the rating includes the participation in terms of how you get scored, we have not heard anything about being penalized for not having that participation. Let me say that. I could be in error making an assumption that we don't have to test every single student. But I was making that thought based on the fact that the A through F rating would not be part of this year's evaluation.
Because I just wonder if there is going to be a minimum expectation for those growth domains.
It will probably be something that we'll read about as more information comes forward.
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
Trustee Evans?
Thank you. I just have a couple clarifying questions. So if we were to go into stage 5 and decisions have to be made, what I heard you say is we should all, the public, trustees, staff, families, there's 2 words to be looking for. Close might mean we would close down for the week, just like we did at the beginning of the school year, with no education happening. Close in person could also be rephrased as going to 100% remote. That's what we did after Thanksgiving. So education was happening, it was just happening virtually.
That's correct.
Okay, so I do think we have to be really careful of those semantics if we are communicating that out to the public. Those are 2 very different scenarios. On that same kind of vein, in the slide that you showed about accommodations, does that mean that certain number of, I think it was 1,111, very interesting number, were denied accommodations, or they were denied the accommodation request to work from home?
They were denied the accommodation to work from home.
Okay, So I'm not sure if there's a way that we can capture or communicate that accommodations may still be happening, just not that one. That was kind of what I took away from our information session last week, was there are lots of accommodations that could be happening in those 1,200, 1,300 requests, just the denial was for the work at home.
Absolutely, and we can get our human capital group to walk us through some of those numbers, and I can send that with the board update.
Okay, I think that would be really good public information as well, because I do think that that is a misunderstanding that is pretty wide-ranging out there. Oh, sorry, were you going to say? Okay. In the pilot with Education Austin, I don't know about the rest of you, but I've gotten lots of emails from one specific school that would really like to join or participate, and they think they've done some really good work to prepare for that. Is there an avenue for those kinds of conversations?
Yes, absolutely. If they already have a plan in place, it does not have to go through Education Austin. We were certainly partnering with them in locations that they were working with us. But all that principal needs to do is contact their executive director, and we can work directly internally to see how we can support the plan that they've put in place.
Okay, very helpful, thank you. And then the last clarification, I think could I ask you to explain a little, or one more time, or maybe just in a new way, why we are choosing as a district to stick with the 14-day quarantine versus moving to the CDC or other TA's recommendations?
Sure. I'll tell you how I was convinced. As I was walking through this, and different superintendents on our call are giving different perspectives. One superintendent from a neighboring school district indicated that they would be staying with a 14-day because just when this change came out, they had a teacher who was on day 12, and that individual would have been back on campus and had COVID on day 13. So that one instance for me was enough to say there's still enough people that it's gonna take that whole 14 days. And we know how much anxiety already exists, and I would simply be adding more anxiety for a couple of days. I just made the decision that that was more cautious and that I wanted to stick with that.
So kind of like the decision to go to 100% remote after Thanksgiving is your proactive approach to.
It was the most cautious decision, and I wanted to stick with the most cautious decision with regard to the quarantining time.
Okay, thank you very much.
I don't think my mic was on the last part, but that's okay.
Trustee Singh?
So thank you so much for this presentation. You're so good at presenting complex information in a very concise way. So I appreciate that. And I also just want to take a moment and just thank you for a number of things. One is for adhering to the 14-day quarantine. Thank you for adding the Director of Health Services to our benefits team. Thank you for granting more accommodations for folks to work at home and honoring the things that we talked about in our board info session. And I just really appreciate that we were the only district to go remote after Thanksgiving. I know that takes some guts. And when I look at this line graph of total positives, and the fact that we actually have gone down, from the week of November 30th to now, I think we made the right decision. And so I just appreciate that, because I know that these decisions are not easy. So I do have a couple of questions. Thank you, Trustee Cindy Anderson, for talking about the STAR at length. and kind of giving some guidance to the community, perhaps, about advocacy. Another idea that I wanted to, Dr. Elizalde, get your opinion on is I am concerned that even for students who take the STAR this year, and because, let's face it, a large percentage of our students probably won't even take it if we don't have a good way to do it virtually. Is TEA thinking about administering like a test at the beginning of the next school year to serve sort of as a pretest to measure growth at the end of the school year and allow us to use that to count as the progress domain?
If it's not an assessment that the state itself will administer, they would not be able to utilize that for that value-added component. They would have to be able to say, we administered it under the same conditions. They did allow us to use certain assessments this year, if we so chose, including STAR. So I anticipate they will allow us, the question you're asking, I think they'll allow us to use an assessment. They're not going to let us use that assessment to substitute for the growth or the value added necessary, because that's really supposed to be from the end of one school year to the end of the next school year. But I'm certainly going to write that one down, and when we have our commissioners call, I will absolutely ask that question specifically.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And I also wanted to clarify something you said, which is the commissioner said that we don't have to make up those 2.5 days during this school year. Okay, so does that mean that we're not going to, and that we're just going to
Correct.
tack it on to the next school year?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Thank you for asking that. Since we're not being required to do it this school year, and my plan right now, barring no other changes,
Okay.
is that we would not be doing that this year. We will add it in next year because we can work it in within our calendar, again, without
Okay.
adding more days to a teacher's contract.
Okay, great. And then, so next year with these additional 2.5 days, does that mean that we would not then have like 2.5 PD days or something like that?
Correct.
Okay.
We would simply replace
Great.
PD or work days with instructional time.
Okay. All right. Which is not ideal either, but it looks like, because I remember as a teacher, I lived for those work days and those PD days. And I do hope that the commissioner can show even more flexibility around that once we get to next year. The other question that's been on my mind a lot is, especially when you were talking about the reason that TEA sort of penalized us was because, it just meant that some students maybe weren't getting access to education. And I know that our district has put in like $13 million this fall alone for technology and hotspots and all of that kind of stuff. But can you tell me, or do you have some idea of what percentage of our students currently do not have reliable internet access and hardware?
So I would say from the hardware component, I would say it's less than 8%. And most of those are being fixed as we speak or changed out as we get notified. There was a real good process that our technology team had with campus leaders, making sure students, I was at one school where they were like, oh, this isn't working. They had a stack that they had just taken in, they were replacing them. With regard to access to the internet, I could not tell you, but I would say that it has to be greater than 10, 15% based on the number of individuals, teachers that are very concerned about students that don't have access or that it's spotty. Even though we've provided hotspots, if you have 2 or 3 students in one household and everybody's trying to use, we experience it just with regular, strong internet service where it can slow down. So you can imagine just a hotspot and 2 or 3 individual students working even though they have their own device. So I really don't know, but I do think that I'm comfortable saying it's more than 10, 15%. It's probably far more than that, but I want to be conservative.
Got it. I would love for, for us to have some conversation at some point about what internet access and broadband looks like in our city. I know that's one of our top 5 legislative priorities also was about broadband. And so I would love some education just on where we are in Austin. I know that you've sent a letter to the Commissioner's Court of Travis County, which is awesome. But I think it's going to just take this larger conversation with us, with the district, with the city and the county and really the state to, have some sort of long-range plan. Maybe it already exists, I don't know. But I think this has such a huge impact, as you well know. The other thing I wanted to ask was, do you have, I guess I would really appreciate maybe at our next meeting in January, just another updated list on how many staff we might be losing, as a result of early retirements or resignations or family, FMLA as a result of the medical accommodation denials. Do you have any early information on this?
I do not right now.
Okay.
But I will see, I will do 2 things, Trustee Singh. One will be to get an updated information and send it in the board update Friday, and then also plan on a report being presented in January.
Okay, fantastic. And then I know that there was, I did receive a few questions from constituents about possible new TEA policies around waivers. Are there any other new policies? I know there were some additions to that one document on TEA's website that were updated December 10th, but is there anything in there that you feel like is important enough for us to be sharing now?
No, I didn't see anything other than, well, we do have, we don't have rules that go with one of the new additions that they've created, which is 2,100 minutes of asynchronous time that can be utilized so that teachers can have time. You give asynchronous work, and in the past, TEA did not allow us to take we have an asynchronous plan, so this only works for a district that turned in an asynchronous plan, which we did. An asynchronous plan can have synchronous things in it, but it also means there are asynchronous things in it. And for people that are, what's synchronous, real time versus work that I've just assigned you to do, so to speak, on your own. So you can now use 2,100 minutes of asynchronous time for students. So if you think about, TEA thinks about a school day being 420 minutes, therefore 420 times 5 is 2,100. So it is my interpretation that this new information, I don't know that it was a waiver, it's new information that allows 2,100 minutes to be utilized asynchronously, could result in, for instance, us taking one Friday a month and allowing teachers to have all asynchronous work. So
Okay.
they could use that time while students are doing asynchronous work. They wouldn't have to be on Zoom. They would actually be able to it won't come close to everything that, they've obviously worked towards, but it would give them kind of a little bit of a breather where they could work on paperwork, they could, grade papers or do things of that nature. They could offer office hours, but it would be asynchronous time.
Okay.
So the intent was for that to be for teachers specifically, to give them kind of a breather. The challenge is we don't have the rules that go with it. For instance, we do already know just from talking with the commissioner's office, they aren't going to let us do them consecutively. Because obviously my thought was, well, if we close, can I use those 2,100 minutes for those days?
Oh, yeah.
But as soon as I thought
That'd
of
be too
that,
logical.
they had a rule that says you can't use them consecutively.
Okay.
So I promise you, I'm trying really hard
I'm sure-
when they
I am
give
sure
us that.
you are.
So that's
Okay.
going to be one, Trustee Singh, that we'll be bringing back. We're taking that to the leadership team to discuss what's the best way. We'll be meeting with Education Austin
Actually, Education Austin, ATPE, along with our administrator organization, as well as taking information from the field about what would be the best way to utilize the 2,100. Do they prefer like one Friday? Do we need to do it district-wide? Is it something we could do campus by campus? There are a lot of decisions, but I don't want to get too far out in front until we get the
Okay.
rules. Because
Got
then
it.
you plan something, then the rules come out, then you have to go back and tell people, and then they get mad at me. You told us we could do this, and then I have to explain it's because TEA changed the rules. So we're hitting pause just so we can learn the rules.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's the only one right now off the top of my head that I can think of.
Okay, great. And then I have two more questions. One is, what would cause us to be in a situation where we shut down entirely after the holidays versus go 100% remote?
Financial,
Okay,
because if we do remote and I have to add time, I'm now adding days to the teacher workday.
okay,
If I close completely, nobody worked. So tacking on the days is adding the days, but the days
Okay,
weren't
got
worked
it.
from the first,
Thank you.
Does that
Yes,
help
yes,
clarify? Because
yes.
I was trying to figure out how
No,
do I
that's
explain
perfect.
that in a way that makes
it
sense?
clicked. It did click, so thank you. And then the last question, and I know I'm sort of treading that line between governance and management with this question, but I also, at the same time, feel compelled to represent concerns that have been brought to me. And so I'll just bring up again the idea of allowing, thinking about ways we can allow our central office staff to be able to work remotely. And I just wanted to know if there were any accommodations that were granted since we last met a week ago, that maybe would allow some of our staff to be able to work from home, particularly central office staff, and just allowing more, I guess, lenient guidelines around that.
I hesitate to answer that because you specifically referenced a certain group, and they're easily identifiable because there was only one speaker from that group.
Okay.
And so I'd rather discuss that. That's a personnel issue, and I think I'd be in violation.
Okay. I'm good with that. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Trustee Singh. Trustees, any other questions? Trustee Zapata?
Just a comment that, we're waiting on this vaccine to get here, and then if it got here tomorrow, how many would want to take it? And I know we can't require staff to do it, so do you have a plan? Is there?
All the information, Trustee Zapata, that I have is all anecdotal from what I've heard, but I haven't heard anyone other than those that have like an allergic reaction to things that would be in the vaccine itself. I have heard no one like, oh, I'm not going to take it. That's not what I've heard, but I haven't done any real collection. I've heard if a doctor says it's not good for you to take vaccines for a particular reason, that's the only reason right now that I've heard. And of course, we're only talking about adults because they're still researching under the age of 16, and we don't have any data with regard to the vaccine for children. But of adults, just anecdotally, and I'm sure there are those that are out there that are concerned about taking it, I just haven't heard it. That doesn't mean it's not there.
Okay. Thank you.
Trustee Zapata, one of the things I might encourage you, there's a CVS health study across the country that shows that 18% of Latinos are hesitant to take the vaccine, and about 38% of African Americans are for historical reasons. But I think for us, I know we've been encouraged to speak publicly about taking the vaccine so that we can have an influence in our communities about that. But I think everybody can make their own decisions about it, and nobody's required to do it. Dr. Lisa, I had one question. I wanted to kind of, just for the benefit of the public, if you could explain again the issue of hold harmless. As you know, in this semester, we were held harmless around attendance for our students and funding. The challenge I think even Trustee Singh brought up about closing schools. The reality is that we're not going to be held harmless currently in the upcoming semester of school. So there are some issues there, and I just kind of wanted to make sure that in terms of the public, that they understand that, especially for those that are advocating to the TEA and to other entities.
Thank you, sir. First, actually, it reminded me of the reason why it could cost us $15 million during semester one for that week of following the Thanksgiving break, is because in order to qualify for the hold harmless for semester one that was granted by the commissioner, you have to have had a certain number of minutes of instructional time. We did not meet those minutes from that week when we closed, because the minutes don't count. Not because I don't count them, but because the Texas Education Agency isn't counting the fact that we went 100% remote, right? And so that could have been $15 million. So the commissioner has allowed us to, he's giving us some flexibility, not going to withhold the money, going to allow us to make up only 50% of that time during the next school year. Really, with saying to us, kind of don't do that again. Second semester, there is no hold harmless. So that means we will be funded based on the average daily attendance of our membership. So we've lost approximately 5,000 students, and then attendance will play a role. So ultimately, that's going to impact our funding for the second semester, which is better than the whole year having to be funded on what the reality is. But it's not as good as if we could have been held harmless and been given a budget the same as we did at the beginning of the year, which would have given us a year to recover from COVID. Right now, we're essentially getting one semester to recover from COVID as opposed to being given a year to recover from COVID.
Thank you. Trustees, any other questions? If not, thank you very much, Dr. Elizalde. We will now move to public testimony for items on consent agenda. In order to accommodate our video conference format, members of the public wishing to participate in the public testimony portion of our meeting called a dedicated ISD phone line in advance of the meeting and audio recorded their remarks. We will now play those recordings, so please listen carefully. I understand that there were 5 members of the public NAISD constituents that called in.
My name is Travis Ford, and I'm a proud Education Austin member calling about agenda item 13.1. Nearly 1,000 teachers and staff will refuse their accommodations with various levels of disability, all told that the recommendations of their doctors do not matter, but they will have to return or take leave. How does this show teachers that AISD cares? How will future teachers view the school districts who, when given the chance, decided to take a stand for all employees to be present in the building despite medical recommendations to the contrary? How are we Austin's home for inclusion learning when our benefits review board excluded medical professionals from processing teacher accommodation requests? All that said, if required by this board and superintendent, I will be returning to in-person teaching. If I'm lucky, I'll get vaccinated in the next 2 to 3 months. I'm 35. Maybe I'll get lucky. Maybe based on the CDC, my condition might be at increased risk of severe illness from COVID-19 makes the odds better in my favor than some of my colleagues who have been denied. I hope that the odds are in my favor. I hope the school board is ready to answer the response for my wife and family if the odds are not in my favor. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Albert Marino. I'm a very proud Austin ISD teacher, and I'm calling to express support for agenda item 13.1. Thank you for continuing to make efforts to improve our culture here at AISD and our educational philosophy. I do have a question about something specific. About halfway down, there is an item, priority focus area, teacher and employee well-being and culture of respect and customer service. And I'm wondering if perhaps Elizalde's email on Friday that was sent late in the evening didn't really consider teacher and employee well-being, and didn't really fit into a culture of respect. I have to say that at my campus, we lost several teachers and 50 years of experience because of decisions made by our district. I expect my boss.
My name is Alex Horn. I am addressing agenda item 13.1. When my husband told me that he wanted to go back to school to get his teaching certificate after graduating from UT with a double major and spending some time in politics, we thought it was a stable choice for our future. A choice where our lives could be predictable and we could grow a family and also manage complicated health needs. It never entered our minds back then that Governor Abbott, TEA Commissioner Morath, tacitly supported by Superintendent Elizalde and the Austin ISD HR department, would ask not only for his skill, expertise, and passion, but they would also be asking him for his life. Teachers love their students and their schools, and many will be returning to campus before it is medically safe and against their doctor's orders. I beg you to show them a sliver of humanity in return and reconsider accommodations for teachers with documented medical needs. My kids need their dad, and I need my husband. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Gloria Vera Bedoya. I am calling about item 11.1. I see that you are due to approve contracts for repairs on Martin Middle School, Bedichek, and Lhasa. And I am calling because I have a concern that there is hardly to no contractors on some of these projects. And I would like to remind the board that we need to honor the 2017 bond promises. And if we are deviating from the plan, we need to be informed. There needs to be transparency in this process. We cannot have a repeat of the school changes 2.0 debacle. Any bond work that might not be happening needs to be published, and we need to know about it. We also need to know why it's not being done, and we need to do better. We need to use more historically underutilized contractors. Also, I have a concern about the 30 schools.
Good afternoon. My name is John McCray Gonzalez. I'm a parent of a child in Dawson Elementary. I'm writing about item 13.1, local educational philosophy, in particular, what is now being called the priority focus area, that is teacher and employee well-being. It seems to me that the recent survey that was sent out over the weekend only gave one option: more work for already overworked teachers and staff, and more work for students, extending school days into Saturdays, extending school into spring break, or even extending school into summer areas without discussing how much this would do, does an injustice to all the people who have suffered during this COVID-19 pandemic, to the people living in East Austin who are suffering a far different epidemic than the rest of Austin is. And it really does injustice to the fact that we're living the worst pandemic in history, at least not in history, but for the last 100 years. Please pay respect to the chaos and disruption this epidemic has happened, and don't let the thoughts of vaccine get us to stop focusing on the eyes and pride, which is
This concludes public testimony. Trustees, are there any questions or clarifications? Trustee Cindy Anderson, Trustee Letitia Anderson.
Dr. Elizalde, can you perhaps have someone clarify, or if you have the information, there was a comment about or suggesting that the funds that we're voting on tonight for the Lhasa project were not part of the bond. And first of all, I do want to make clear that those repairs are to the East Side Memorial Facility, which was mentioned as the Lhasa facility in the consent agenda, which I think could have been confusing for some because East Side students are still at the East Side Memorial Facility, and Lhasa is still at the LBJ facility, and so I think that may have been confusing, but it was part of the 2017 bond, and so if you could have somebody clarify that, I would appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am. Trustee Cindy Anderson. I believe I have our resident expert, Matias Segura, who will be able to address this question. There he is. Mr. Segura, could you help us out with that question? I'm not sure if you heard the comment that was made by, you did. Okay, great.
Absolutely. Matias Segura, Operations Officer for AISD. Hello, trustees. Yes, in the agenda item, the request is for HVAC and electrical repairs at LASA. We could have improved the clarification of it. It's actually for improvements at Eastside Early College High School at Johnston campus. As part of the 2017 bond program, Eastside Early College High School is relocating to the original L.C. Anderson campus, and then LASA will be moving to what is currently the old, currently Eastside Early College High School, but the Johnston campus. These improvements were considered and included in the 2017 bond program and are part of our overall plan to improve the campus to prepare for the students coming in starting next August.
So let me just repeat it and make sure that I got it correctly. We had a campus formerly known as Johnston, which changed to Eastside. We are relocating Eastside to the original Anderson High School site. There's a building we toured, many of us did a month or so ago. Therefore, LASA will then relocate away from the LBJ campus where it is currently at. They're both in the same building. LASA will then move to what is currently Eastside, formerly known as Johnston. Okay.
That is correct.
All right, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for that. I just wanted to make it clear that those were projects listed in the bond language. There's no bait and switch. Thank you.
If you would, can you provide some information as to the why, when you initially got the committee together to look at accommodations, why you didn't include a medical professional?
So there should always be a benefits review committee in every organization. Prior to COVID, there should have been a benefits review committee for any type, because accommodations can occur at any time. The challenge for us right now has been when you have COVID, you have a lot of individuals that have concerns. And then when I realized we didn't have one at all, I then worked with our team to create such a benefits review committee. The benefits review committee does not have a physician because it is not about whether we believe the physician or that we're making any physician type decisions. The first question is always about the position that the individual holds. The second one then is with regard to what the physician says. We do not question the validity of the doctor's notes. So in every district, doesn't mean every district in the world, every district I've worked in, the benefits review committee is made up of your legal, your HR or human capital, along with representatives from like the academics, the school leadership. And in this case, I have taken the suggestion that we should have someone from our health department, our own internal health department. So I did add Miss Alexandra Copeland, who formerly did work with Austin Public Health, so that there would be a variety of viewpoints. But in general, it's an ongoing committee. This is a committee that should meet regularly as any type of accommodations come through. And so you would not typically have a physician part of that committee.
Thank you.
Thank you, trustees. Any other questions or clarifications? So if not, thank you all. As a reminder, please feel free to share any general comments or questions on non-voting items with the board by email at trustees@austinisd.org. We will now move to the consent agenda. And before I open the item for discussion, I want to clarify with Trustee Zapata regarding consent item 13.2. And Trustee Zapata, we talked a little bit earlier, but you said last week that you mentioned a potential conflict with the board moving their meetings to Thursday night. And the administration informed me that you were able to change your other meeting to a different night starting in January, but I think February is when we should start it. Is that correct? Okay. So thank you for the clarification, Trustee Zapata. With that information, we're going to move on. Are there any consent items that trustees would like to pull for a separate vote? Trustee Singh?
13.1.
13.1, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any other items, trustees? Trustee Ellens, sorry.
I would like to pull 13.2, please.
Second.
1.2, trustee Cindy Anderson, okay. Any other items, trustees? If not, Secretary Ellens, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Give me just a minute.
Sure.
Okay. I move approval of consent agenda items 18.1 through 12.2, 13.3, and 13.4.
Can you repeat that again? I'm sorry, I didn't know that.
Items 8.1, is that the starting spot? 8.1 through 12.2, 13.3, and 13.4.
Great, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Trustee Foster. Trustees, is there any discussion on any of these consent items? I did have one comment. I just wanted to thank publicly our Deborah Cartwright and Felipe Uwoya for their service to the board for the Travis County Appraisal District. I really appreciate their volunteer, non-paid work on behalf of the school district and our students. Having a motion by Secretary Ellens and a second by Trustee Foster to approve consent agenda items 8.1 through 12.2 and 13.3 and 13.4. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. And the motion passes by all those on the dais. We will now move to those items pulled from the agenda. And the first one is agenda item 13.1. Trustee Ellens, do we have a motion?
I move approval of agenda item 13.1.
And do I have a second?
Second.
So trustees, any questions or comments on it? Recognize Trustee Singh.
Thank you. First, I want to thank the policy committee for all their hard work on all these policies. And so my comment is fairly minor, but I believe the intent here is for this policy to reflect better the strategic framework that we approved this summer. And when I looked at the bottom of page 1 of AE Local, where the priority focus areas are listed, I think that I think the way we approved the priority focus areas was having the 4 main ones, like the student well-being and achievement, teacher and employee well-being, cultural respect and customer service, and fiscal stewardship and prioritization, with equity sort of being the underlying, an underlying focus of all of them. And so we deliberately did not list that as a 5th and separate focus area in this document. It was really more something that undergirded the other 4. So is there a way, so I'm thinking we might want to add some words to the end of the last bullet where equity is written and just say something like, so my motion would be equity as I can't read that. Equity is a cornerstone of each priority focus area.
Trustees, do we have any comments about, yes?
So I knew we were going to be discussing this, and so did have some conversations with our, with Edna Butts, who is the staff liaison for the policy committee, as well as with Christine Badillo to make sure our board legal counsel, to make sure that, because the concern was that we wanted to make sure that what we were passing in this policy did not conflict with what we had already voted upon in the strategic framework. And so there were, the suggestion was the wording that Trustee Singh has proposed would actually be the priority focus areas could potentially be just that sentence that says equity is the cornerstone of each priority focus area, and then list the 4 bulleted priority focus areas. So it would basically strike the 5th bullet of equity and write equity is the cornerstone of each priority focus area as a sentence above the then listed 4 priority focus areas. I know that I hope that I'm explaining it in a way that makes sense to my colleagues.
So trustees, any questions?
Yeah, can you rephrase or?
Yes, I can. I want to be visual. That's me, the teacher. I wish I had a whiteboard. That's what I was hoping for right now. But basically, when you're looking at the policy, it has a heading where it says the priority focus area. And if you are looking at the policy in board docs, and the way it's written, it just has the bullet points. So before the bullet points are listed, it would have a sentence that says, equity is the cornerstone of each priority focus area, as the wording of Trustee Singh. And then it would just list those 4 priority focus areas with the understanding that equity supports all of those.
Gotcha.
Or equity is a foundational part of all of those.
That helps, because I'm recalling a graphic
Yes.
that had like 4 boxes and then the one. Yeah,
It looks like this.
Got it.
So it's basically trying to verbally describe the visual graphic that is in the strategic plan framework that we have. And our legal counsel did say that this does not conflict and that it would be basically the mirror image. By making this very small change, it doesn't make either of those things conflict each other. So we would just be supporting the mirror document of what we had already voted upon.
Thank you.
So trustees, any other questions? If not, I might ask Trustee Singh to make a motion to amend the motion and then get it second and we'll pass it and then we'll.
Would you like to make the motion for me?
I don't know if I can.
Yeah,
Under
you-
Robert's Rules of Order,
You can.
could I do that? I can amend the motion?
You can make the
Okay. I move to amend the motion to read, under priority focus area, the sentence added, equity is the cornerstone of each priority focus area, with the 4 priority focus areas bulleted below that sentence, reading student well-being and achievement, teacher and employee well-being, culture of respect / customer service, fiscal stewardship, and prioritization.
Do I have a second?
Second.
So, Trustee Wagner? So having a motion to amend by Trustee Ashe with a second from Trustee Wagner. All those in favor of the amendment, raise your right hand. And the motion to amend passes unanimously. So any other questions about item 13.1? If not, having a motion by Trustee Ellens and a second by Trustee Letitia Anderson to approve item 13.1 as amended, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. And the motion passes by all those on the dais. So now, Trustee Ellens, do we have a motion for item 13.2?
Yes. Yes.
Is there a second?
Hold on.
Second.
Except I would actually like to propose
Would you like me
a
to make the
different
motion?
motion. I
You want me to
didn't
make the
do the
motion?
motion.
Okay.
Yeah.
I move that we approve item 13.2.
Thank you.
Okay, trustee Ashley moves to approve 13.2. Is there a second?
Second.
Cindy Anderson seconded. Okay, and I'll recognize trustee Ellens.
Which Anderson seconded?
Cindy Anderson.
Okay.
It's a tie.
So following our conversation in the information session, it was my understanding that the administration was going to make 2 changes to this section under special or emergency meetings on page 1 of 4. One of the changes or additions got made where we've added in the superintendent has a role. The other change didn't seem to make it. So I would like to propose that first sentence under special or emergency meetings require the request by 3 members of the board rather than 2, so that the board president and the superintendent shall call special meetings at the board president's discretion or on request by 3 members of the board. It would also be in the second paragraph, the board president. I would also think we need to say, and the superintendent on this one, shall call an emergency meeting when it is determined by the board president or 3 members of the board that emergency or urgent public necessity as defined by law warrants the meeting. So it's really 3 changes, changing the word 2 to 3 in both those paragraphs, and then duplicating the addition of and the superintendent in the second paragraph. Do you want my rationale?
Well, I have a question about that, just from a contingency perspective, like an emergency meeting. Mike, please. Oh, sorry. I just had a clarification about if it's a contingency, if it's an emergency meeting and it's about the superintendent, but.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Or let's say, I don't know, something happens to the board president, and they're not available. I just want to make sure we have the most flexibility to call a meeting, an emergency meeting, but I think what you're getting at in the rationale is not to just have 2 trustees kind of manage a meeting or try to get more meetings. I think with 3 trustees, it seems more feasible that it's really going to be an emergency or,
So, I do think.
but I'll let you.
Yeah, I
explain
do
that.
think the emergency meeting one has specific laws and rules that, I see your point. There are reasons the superintendent might not be involved in that, which is why it didn't get added. So I will remove that request. But I would, the 3 members of the board, we are an unusual board in that we have 9 members. Most policies that come from TASB are considering boards of 7 or sometimes even 5 trustees. So that is sort of the root cause of my suggestion.
Thank you. Just to clarify, you're changing paragraph 1 to add 3 instead of 2, and then paragraph 2, you're changing the 2 to 3.
Unless legal thinks I don't need to do it there.
Well, I was
So
just gonna.
trustee Anderson and then trustee Ash.
I was going to say that I think for me, your request to want to include the superintendent had more for me to do with the fact that we need the support of the administration to actually host a board meeting. And so you have to coordinate with the administration in order to actually have it scheduled, posted, televised, et cetera. And so there needs to be some coordination of that effort that I'm not sure is really captured by that, because I feel like the average person could read that and say, well, 2 trustees can call a meeting for anything they want to, and it's gonna happen, but it takes a lot more support behind the scenes to actually make it happen. Is there a way to say that doesn't prevent, I guess, the scenario maybe you're referring to, Geronimo?
Christine? I don't know if you.
I would say that I think I'm the changes proposed by Trustee Ellens, I think will effectively get you where you need to be in terms of your concern of the administrative burden of putting on a meeting, and therefore we need always the superintendent's buy-in for a meeting. I would just say there may be a point in time in the future of, any school district where they might not want to be hamstrung in that way. Yeah. It's the board, these are the board's meetings.
You don't need it in you don't need it
as a
in
board,
policy.
You need to maintain the ability. I mean, we obviously understand always your administration is going to have to unlock the doors and get the cameras rolling and things like that. There's only so much you can do. But as a matter of policy, I don't think it would be advisable for the board to.
I understand what you're saying, but it's also not the board that posts the meeting, and the board has no access to the equipment, to the doors, to anything else. Those are administrative functions. So I guess I'm just sort of wondering how you convey that a collaboration is still necessary, because there are functions the board cannot perform in making it a legal meeting without the support of the administration.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. I just think if push comes to shove, it's the board's meeting. And you want to have the ability as a board to say, no, we're having this meeting. I don't think you want to foreclose that.
I will jump in. I do believe the policy committee will be coming back to this policy. She.
Well, why don't I recognize Trustee Ashe and then.
Yes, I did want to remind all the trustees that this is not the last time we will see BE Local, and that, as I referenced earlier in the policy committee report, we will be bringing it back to discuss agenda building, and so we can certainly take a look at this again with the help of legal and administration to see if there is some wording that we can do to provide some clarity around the situation that you're speaking of, Trustee Cindy Anderson. And I did also want to say that I did speak to Ms. Badillo about changing the number from 2 to 3, and there are no legal reasons or legal complications by making that change. And in fact, it keeps us, for lack of a better adjective, proportional given the size of our board and what is typical from TASB for recommendations. So if it's typically a 7-member board, 2 members being able to call would be similar to a 9-member board with 3 members being able to call the meeting. So it was a proportional change that we would not want to go more than 3, and there are several legal reasons why we could not go more than 3 that have to do with walking quorum. But we would make sure that that would be the number that that would be the most we would do.
And just as background, I was just talking to our council. We've had one emergency meeting in at least the last 3 years. I don't know before that, and that was the meeting on March around COVID and closing schools. And we've had several special meetings, mostly around the superintendent's search. So just to give you an example of what those meetings, why those are raised in that way, or why they're handled in that way. So I think we're on the motion to amend.
To amend would be to change the word 2 to the word 3 in both the first and second paragraphs.
And I think we have not had a second to your
Correct.
motion to amend.
Second.
Okay, so there's a motion to amend item 13.2 with those 2 changes. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion to amend 13.2, please raise your right hand. And the motion passes by all those on the dais to amend. So having a motion by Trustee Ashe and a second by Trustee Cindy Anderson to approve item 13.2 as amended, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. And the motion passes by all those on the dais. So and thank you all very much, trustees. We will now recess the open meeting at 9:02 p.m. and move to executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code Sections 551.074, 551.072, 551.073, 551.087, 551.076, 551.129, and 551.071. For purposes of this video meeting, the board will now leave this open meeting, which will remain live online and convene privately in a separate meeting. When we're finished with our executive session, we will reconvene here to close the meeting. And again, we thank you for your patience. Good morning. Buenos dias. We will now reconvene the open meeting at 12:07 a.m. Secretary Ellens, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Having a motion by trustee Ellens and a second by trustee Cindy Anderson to adjourn, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. And the motion passes by all those on the dais. The meeting is now adjourned at 12:07 a.m. Good night.
On what day?
On December 15th, 2020.
Thank you.